Hello, welcome to Score Sports' very own ScoreSide Chat, where we talk about the glories of sports and why it fascinates us. And today, we will be going over the top 3 moments in sports in all of our lifetimes. And Spencer, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, sure. I will talk about a top 3, going from least important to most important in my life. I want
Okay.
to start with seeing Cody Bellinger hit a home run live against the Washington Nationals. I want to say last season. That was really cool to see. And then number 2 will have to be seeing Raheem Mostert rush for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Packers in the NFC Championship. It's been a while since the Niners had a playoff run like that. And then the number 1 that was most important to me, reminded me, why I watch this team, why I watch the sport, would have to be in the Week 18 49ers at Rams game. Deebo Samuel threw a 25-yard touchdown to Juwan Jennings on my birthday, and seeing my home team, or my favorite team, was something I couldn't have asked for anymore, and that was a great way to cap it off.
Okay, that was a good, quick 3. Nick, you want to talk about your top 3 here?
Yeah. I'd love to. For my third one, it's hard not to kind of show my Eagles bias here, but I have to go with the Deshaun Jackson immaculate return. Um, and I think it was just kind of like another game, and it was the very late game. It really kind of reminds me of why I love the late game adrenaline. You never know what's going to happen. And one of the things that I always would tell my grandfather when we would be watching random football games on Sundays is you never count a team out until until the final second, till it's over. And, you know, especially when you see a punt return get muffed and you see the ball on the floor, you're just like, oh, okay, well, that was that. That was fun. But watching Deshaun Jackson pick up that ball and just start scrambling, doing whatever Deshaun Jackson does, one of the fastest players in the league. And he just took off, and all of a sudden the play started coming together, and blocks were there, no penalties. Somehow there was no penalties after all of the 14-second madness. He takes it back, runs around, makes sure the clock is out, and scores a touchdown to bring like the entire comeback from because like earlier in the game I was like there's no way we win this game. Comes back from a 31-10 deficit going into the fourth quarter. I was absolutely shocked, and seeing Deshaun Jackson just run it and just remember jumping up and down screaming was definitely one of the best moments I've had. And then my second one was more recent, by my favorite baseball player, Bryce Harper. This was against the Cubs in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, August 15, 2019, against the Cubs, bottom of the ninth, down 2 runs, bases loaded at Citizens Bank Park, watching this on TV. And Derek Holland, a left-handed hitter, I remember very vividly the announcers were saying like, yeah, a lefty versus lefty is not. I mean, it's a very it's a good thing for the pitching side, especially against a guy like Harper. Um, and all of a sudden, he just leaves a ball hanging, and that ball had to have been hit 470 feet all the way into like the third deck of right field. Like that ball was in the air so long, and everyone knew it. And I was jumping up and down, screaming, "It's a walk-off grand slam for Bryce Harper." I consistently will go back to that hit and just watch the madness and remember just screaming. I'm a sucker for the late game antics, in case you guys can't tell, but I also remember Bryce Harper was running the bases so fast he almost caught up to the guy that was in front of him. Um, and he almost passed him, which would have not been good, but it was just a big moment for the Phillies, and I'm just really happy to see anytime a late game, just a walk off is just the greatest thing in baseball, honestly. That brings me to my number 1. It's pretty predictable if we're coming from an Eagles fan. You have to go with the Philly special. I mean, that Super Bowl was probably if not the best Super Bowl I've seen in my lifetime. Back and forth with the greatest quarterback, Tom Brady. I mean, and the entire storyline with the Eagles, with Nick Foles, having Carson Wentz go down earlier in the season, which it was a game that I was at. So if you had asked me my least favorite games, that game would have to be up there because I was there. But watching that play just and seeing all of the things after the fact of just how that play came to be and everything just really cements that in NFL history, let alone Eagles history. And, winning our first Super Bowl I was sobbing that game. And so was my entire family, who is all Eagles fans, who just jumping up and down, just screaming. And, you would think that something's happening in their house with all the screaming, but it was truly one of the best moments as a sports fan. And I know that's not, it wasn't a late game thing. It was just in the middle of the game, but just to see, I mean, and they tried that earlier. The Patriots tried a play similar like that earlier in the game and it didn't work. So to see it just work and for a touchdown too, perfect. And that's my 3.
Nice. Michael, you want to go ahead with your 3?
Yeah. So my number 3, Spencer, is the Rams winning the 2022 NFC Championship game.
You deserve hellfire. That is awesome.
I mean, yeah. But before this game, the Rams hadn't beaten the Niners since 2018, which was week 17 of that season, which I was at that game. But yeah, I remember being content in a way because going into that game, I expected us to lose that. And I was like, you know what? We made it to the NFC Championship game. We have a pretty good roster. We were down by 10. So I was like, all right, go Bengals. And then we started to come back. And then eventually Aaron Donald getting the pressure on Jimmy G to force that interception late in the fourth quarter to seal the game. I went ecstatic. Because also being a Rams/Raiders fan, I've always kind of harbored some resentment towards San Francisco. So getting to see one of my teams beat them in the playoffs was incredible. Then my number 2 is going to be the Dodgers winning the 2020 World Series. Football is my favorite sport, but the first sport I ever got into was baseball, and the Dodgers have they've always been a part of my life. There are pictures of me at games when I was 4 years old. I had, Dodger jerseys when I was a really little kid. They've just always been a big part of my life. I've always been a Dodger fan. And, we got to the dance 2 times before that. Got cheated out of it the one time and lost to Boston. And then finally getting to experience a World Series championship and see my favorite player of all time, Clayton Kershaw, lift the trophy. I was close to tears that night because, yeah. And then my number 1 is a regular season game. This was a game I was at. This was the loudest I've ever heard a stadium in person. It was the Dodgers and coincidentally the Rays back in 2013. The Dodgers were down 6-1 in the bottom of the 8th inning. Energy in the stadium was low, but there were still a good amount of people left. Then we score a bit. So the score is 6-3 going into the bottom of the 9th. And the Dodgers start to come back until eventually the game is tied. And then there was 1 out with men on first and second. Jerry Hairston goes up to bat. He hits it. It's a ground ball to the pitcher. He turns around to throw to the second baseman to try and get the double play, go into extra innings. Overshoots the throw, goes right past him, and Adrian Gonzalez rounds third and heads home, and the Dodgers win it 7-6 in the bottom of the 9th. That was the loudest I've ever heard Dodger Stadium. That's the loudest I've heard any stadium I've ever been in. I just remember jumping up and down, screaming my head off. Just yeah, I remember that so vividly. Yeah, that's my favorite sports moment that I've ever witnessed on TV or, in person.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I got to be at the game to see that.
That's pretty sick. So I'll start mine with a regular season game. It was actually this past season. So, I mean, like, let me just put some context in. I am for myself, I'm a big hockey fan over anything else. Although I do enjoy the entertainment of all the other sports. But all these three will just be Los Angeles Kings moments that I've seen in my lifetime. So this number 3 for me was on February 11th, 2023. It was Dustin Brown's retirement ceremony. When they retired his number 23 to the rafters. It was this very emotional ceremony right before the game where all the LA Kings greats were in the building. You know, you had Matthias Nordstrom, you had the roster from the 2012 and 14 Cup wins. You got Vachon was in the building. You got I believe Dion was there. But yeah, it was just like a really nice ceremony right before. You know, a couple players had a couple of speeches, just talking about Dustin Brown and how great he is to the Los Angeles Kings franchise. And the big surprise was that they brought in the Stanley Cup for him to raise one last time in the exact same spot where he lifted on the ice, which was amazing to see. I was crying before the game. Like, it was a very emotional moment for all 18,000 people in there. So, but that's just the ceremony itself. The game was Pittsburgh Penguins versus the Los Angeles Kings. With the significance being that Jeff Carter, who was still suited up playing in the NHL, was on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Carter being a key player in both of those cups, he had to have been there. So, but the game was probably one of the most entertaining blowouts I've ever seen. The game ended 6-0 in the Kings' favor. The things I saw that night was my first hat trick. Kempe scored 4 goals that night. And it was a natural hat trick too. 1, 2, 3, and then he scored a 4th. So I got to throw my hat. I was very excited to do that. But then towards the end of the third period, Mikey Anderson shoves Sidney Crosby, and Crosby flops, right? So initially, Mikey Anderson is given 2 minutes for cross-checking, right? But then Sidney Crosby's like complaining to the ref for some reason, and now he skates, after complaining to the ref, he skates over to Mikey Anderson and then gives him a shove. So Crosby gets a penalty now for unsportsmanlike, while Mikey Anderson gets his cross-checking penalty. So like they have matching penalties. But then like Crosby's complaining like, why did I get a penalty? Like, I just shoved, I went over to talk to him. And then he's just chasing the ref, like, across the ice, like, just going in circles. And eventually the ref has enough. The ref blows his whistle, gets onto the microphone for a third time. He says, number 87 for Pittsburgh has a game misconduct. And Crosby gets ejected. The Dieter Rule on the organ starts playing, na, 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 hey, hey, goodbye, right? Everyone's waving goodbye to Sidney Crosby as he walks down the tunnel. And that was just a fantastic night. It couldn't have been more perfect. You know, shutting out the Penguins, seeing Dustin Brown have his number retired. And the funny thing is that in the intermission, he walked right past me where I was sitting too. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, that's my number 3 moment. I'm dragging on this, but my number 2 moment is a playoff series, and probably one of the most iconic series that will ever live in Kings history is the 2014 first round against the San Jose Sharks, where we reverse swept San Jose, being the fourth. I believe right now we are still the fourth team to ever win 4 straight after going down 3-0 in a playoff round. And just being 10 years old, I don't think I was I was like the saddest 10-year-old kid on earth when we were down 3-0. And then to see us come back and win one game at a time, my dad and I were like, yeah, we're winning the cup again this year. So that was pretty fun. In my first overall all-time moment was the Kings winning their first Stanley Cup against beating the New Jersey Devils in 6 games. Not much to really say there. Seeing Dustin Brown lift that Stanley Cup and, just being an excited 8-year-old, it was a fun time for me as a little Kings fan. And now growing to, it helped me grow my love for the game a lot more as I grew older. So those are my top 3 moments as a sports fan. So although, yeah, they're all in one sport, but whatever, right? All right, so thank you for tuning in to Fourscore Sports' very own ScoreSide Chat. Hopefully we get to do this again sometime. So we'll see you for our next episode. Thanks.